The NFL is set next week to begin unveiling their top 100 players as voted on by players across the league. Which Miami Dolphins will make the cut? We're exploring that here today on this episode of Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting. You can find our shows on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Tip of the cap to our everydayers, because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase on last-minute tickets for the lowest prices, guaranteed. Welcome to the first major step in the return to football in the month of July. Rookies report to training camp for the Miami Dolphins today. Feels good. And this time next week, the Dolphins will have their full report date for the rest of the team. And then practices will start shortly thereafterwards. And the following week will be public practices for those in South Florida hoping to go to training camp. And I hope to see you there. But one of the other things that happens in this part of the calendar, the NFL is very smart about this with their NFL media, with how they choose to do this. And they milk it for all it's worth. And we're doing something similar over on Locked On NFL Scouting, but we're getting out in front of the NFL with what they're doing. Is they have their player polled top 100 players as voted on by players across the league, where they poll all these players and then they take the aggregate scores of all of them together, and it gives you the list of the player voted top 100 teams in the NFL. And they take 2 weeks and they reveal 10 players a day for 10 days. And that's how they kind of bridge the gap until the preseason games start from this dead period of the calendar. And I'm not going to do that here on Locked On Dolphins and go individual position group deep dives on who's going to make the top 100, but we are going to look at who made that list last year and who I think makes that list for the Miami Dolphins this year. Really interesting to look back upon. And the Miami Dolphins had 6 players last year who made the NFL top 100. Those players were Tyreek Hill, who came in at number 7 overall, Jaylen Ramsey, who, of course, did not play for the Dolphins in 2022, but was acquired in the offseason and came over. He was number 36 on that list. Jaylen Waddle was number 44 on that list. Christian Wilkins was number 81 on that list. Tua Tagovailoa was number 82 on that list. And Terron Armstead was number 83 on that list. So Dolphins pretty well represented, right? Like, I'm not a math guy, but I could tell you there's 32 teams across the league, and you had 6 in the top 100. If you had 6 for all 32 teams, it's 192. So Miami had about twice the representation of what an average team should have in the NFL 100 last year. And I don't think there's any question when you looked at the Dolphins roster last year, you identified the top end talent. And I remember saying this many times, the team building ideology of what the Dolphins have assembled is, if you're going to do with players with some durability questions, you want to pool as many needle moving cornerstone type talents as you possibly can, so that throughout the course of the attrition of a season, if you lose a guy here, you lose a guy there, you have enough other difference-making players that can help bridge the gap, and you hope you sync things up and you get healthy at the right time of year. All of that happened with the exception of getting healthy at the right time of year, right? Because you lost your 3 top pass rushers who are all really impactful players for you. Every single one of your proven talent, elite production skill players was hurt and missed time at some point in the final month of the season. And then the offensive line was a disaster after about week 6 all the way through, as far as the backup players who had to play and play not only meaningful snaps, but majority snaps for you at 4 out of the 5 spots on the offensive line. So didn't Didn't get right and aligned at the end of the season, but the ideology did apply to the Dolphins and allow them to win 11 games and make the postseason. So the shift that we saw this offseason, and one of these 6 players that made the NFL 100 last year is no longer here. He signed a $27.5 million per year contract to go play for the Las Vegas Raiders and Christian Wilkins. Now, what Miami did with that and the departure of Robert Hunt was a salary redistribution and remodeling as far as going out for potentially a deeper team. Does that mean you're going to see significant cut downs on the players who make the top 100? That's what the objective is of the rest of today's show, is looking at both sides of the ball and having an honest conversation of who I think has a legitimate argument, who I think is a slam dunk, whether the guys that made it last year are going to make it again. And if they do, whether they're going to be higher or lower than what they were last year. So it's a really fun opportunity to kind of not only look at the Dolphins individually, but look at the trends of players across the league, right? Because, for example, Joe Burrow and Travis Kelce were the 2 players immediately in front of Tyreek Hill. And Travis Kelce, I know I had him on my fantasy team last year, so I know it wasn't a traditional Travis Kelce type season. And Joe Burrow missed half the year. I think, does Tyreek Hill move up? Were there players behind Tyreek Hill? Micah Parsons, Chris Jones, Aaron Donald, who retired, Trent Williams, Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs was back there. He's certainly not past him. So just looking at Tyreek individually, I think he's got a pretty good argument to say, hey, he was 7 last year, led the league in receiving again, was on pace for 2,000 yards. Does Tyreek move up from 7? I would probably say so. But we'll get the rest after the break. Make sure you stick with us. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is sponsored by BetterHelp. Comparison can be the thief of joy, and it's easy these days to hop on your phone, look at all your friends, and it seems like they have their lives together because you're seeing the picture that they portray of themselves on Instagram. But everybody is fighting their own individual battles. And therapy can help you focus on what you want instead of what others have, so you can start living your best life. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. You can fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. So as I look at the offensive side of the ball for Miami, I think the players that made it, Jaylen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, and for all of the focus with Jaylen Waddle and wanting to get him more involved in the offense and being a little bit more balanced with targets, I would say through all of that, had Jaylen Waddle not experienced an injury against Dallas, he probably has 1,200, or he probably has 1,200 yards again in year 3. And I think that this is one of those players for me, Jaylen Waddle, who ranked, 44th last year. I don't think he'll rank 44th again this year. I think he'll probably rank lower because he was a little bit of a reduced role. He didn't lead the league in yards per reception like he did the past year in 2022. But there is a whole process versus results plague, if you will, that I think fans of every team in every sport have to fight that battle with. Because it is ultimately a results-oriented league. You either won the game or you didn't. You either won the championship or you didn't. You either won a playoff game or you didn't. You either won your division or you didn't. You either scored a touchdown when you needed to or you didn't. But every time you hear players for every sport talk about the winning formula, they talk about the process. They talk about All of the, being routine oriented and your routine putting you in a position to be the best player, to give yourself the best position. It's like measuring quarterbacks on touchdowns and interceptions, right? You can make a good decision and have the receiver drop the ball and throw a pick. The box score is going to tell you you threw a pick. But in reality, you made a good throw and a good decision, and the receiver didn't catch the ball. And I think if you apply that across like the universal, like full team pictures, Waddle's production, the bottom line, the box score, is not commensurative with who he is as a football player. He has to coexist on an offense with Tyreek Hill, who's getting 180 targets per year. And the team has kind of fueled this campaign for 2,000 yards in each of the last two seasons. And in reality, if you put Jaylen Waddle in a different role, or if you put him as the first progression player more often, and if you just watch the film and you say, is he winning his routes? Is he creating separation? Is he open? Yes. Is he getting the ball? No, because it's being thrown somewhere else. Good process would be looking at Jaylen Waddle and recognizing how physically capable he is. Results process would say, well, his receiving production went down last year. He's not as good as he was the previous year. I don't think that's true. And that applies to a number of players on the team. It applies to Javon Holland on defense, for example, as well. I've seen in the comments every time we do a Javon Holland-oriented show, where's the big plays? Where's all the – and yes, splash plays are a part of the picture. But you turn on the tape and you watch the plays that other teams can't make and the throws they can't attempt because of what Javon Holland does. You watch Javon Holland from depth. You get up and fit the run and run the alley and square guys up and tackle guys in open space to prevent additional yardage that your average safety wouldn't make. There's a lot of hidden yardage with Javon Holland as a player that you turn on the tape, you see it. And I think the same thing applies with Jaylen Waddle. Do I think he'll be 44th? No, because I think from just a superficial level, it will be easy to say, oh, well, the production went down. He's still an amazing player, but it's not as good as last year. I think he makes it. Tyreek Hill, I think, and we touched on this already, I think he goes up. Tua Tagovailoa was 82nd last year and then proceeded to play in every single game. Throw for 4,600 yards, 29 touchdowns. I think he's on, and I think he goes up. The next quarterback in front of Tua on this list was Geno Smith at 77 last year. Then it was Lamar at 72. Lamar will certainly go up. I think Tua passes Geno Smith. Jared Goff at 66. That's kind of the stratosphere. If you ask me to guess where Tua lands on this list, it'd probably be somewhere between 60 and 75. Just ballpark ranging it. I just can't imagine a player who had his best career season, was on the list at 82 last year, doesn't make the list and stays fully healthy. It's like that's a big deal for him as a player. So put me down for Tua on as a yes as well. I think he goes up from 82. Terron Armstead made the list last year. I can see him making the list off of what he does when he's healthy and his reputation as a player. This is one of the most respected players across the entire league. They do the O-Lines Masterminds Clinic in Texas every year, and that just happened, I think, last week. And Terron was there, as always, infusing his wisdom in how he plays the game for every young offensive lineman in college and pros that attends this summit for offensive linemen that happens. You've seen the value. You've heard the value for players on the Dolphins team. So, yes, Terron Armstead is a player who is a late-stage career player who's not the best version of himself versus what he was when he was in the prime of his career. All of that is true. But I think the reputation of Terron Armstead and the fact that he could still go, and there were times where you could tell he was really battling with what he was working through last year. I think there's enough where I do predictively think he holds on to a spot. It just might be a little lower on the list. If you told me he was off, I wouldn't be surprised. But I think he holds on, and I think it's because of what he's capable of when he's healthy. 80% of Terron Armstead is still better than a lot of other players across the league on the offensive line. And because of his reputation and wisdom as an offensive lineman. And whether that's part of the criteria or not, that's not really the point, right? It's that the players are voting. And the players, I know, look at Terron Armstead, especially offensive lineman, and he is holding very, 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 very high regard. I think Raheem Mostert makes it as well. That was a player that didn't make it for the Dolphins last year. Set the franchise record in touchdowns, kind of rushing production across the league as a whole last year was really down. I think I saw Christian McCaffrey was the only back to surpass 1,200 yards. Yeah. The NFL rushing leaders last year, Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry was number 2 at 1167. Kyron Williams, 1144. James Cook, 1122. DeAndre Swift, 1049. James Conner, 1040. Najee Harris, 1035. Joe Mixon, 1034. David Montgomery, 1015. Raheem Mostert, 1012. Yards per carry, Raheem Mostert was better than Henry. James Cook, DeAndre Swift, Najee Harris, Joe Mixon, David Montgomery. And he had the most touchdowns of rushing touchdowns of anybody in the list. Now, Christian McCaffrey ended up having 21 total touchdowns because he had 7 in the passing game. Raheem had 21 because he had 18 on the ground and 3 receiving touchdowns. I think anytime you have 20-something touchdowns in a season, you're going to make the top 100 list, right? Is it a short-lived stay? Probably, just because of never mind Raheem's kind of where he's at in his career, but the rotation for backs with Achane, I don't think Achane makes it. And then you have Jalen Wright in the picture as well. But I think Raheem Mostert will have last year as a catapult to being top 10 in rushing and tied for the league in touchdowns from scrimmage to make the top 100 list. So I think you have a running back. I think you have an offensive lineman. I think you have both wide receivers, and I think you have your quarterback. I think you have 5 guys on offense. And I know that's kind of the inverse of what the feedback was from Jeremy Fowler's executive poll. You know, the Dolphins haven't been very well represented in that. A lot of honorable mentions. But I do think the performance of all of those guys is going to warrant amongst their peers good representation. What about on defense, though? That's the big mystery. We're going to get into that next here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. Going to the game is not supposed to be stressful, which is why you need to get your tickets with Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball. Makes getting tickets faster and easier than ever before. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer you get to first pitch. They have killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and a lowest price guarantee, making Gametime the place to take the guesswork out of buying your tickets for Major League Baseball and all of your favorite events, whether it's sports, concerts, comedy, theater, or more. You can save up to 60%. And with their all-in pricing, you can see the total upfront, so there's no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today for last-minute tickets with the lowest prices, guaranteed. The defensive players for Miami last year included Jalen Ramsey and Christian Wilkins, and that was it. Christian Wilkins at 81 last year proceeded to have 9 sacks. I certainly think he will catapult that and take advantage of it. And he will be on this list. So that will be a player that the Dolphins lost that is on the top 100 list. I think about the other players. Obviously, Xavier Howard wasn't on the list last year. I don't think he put a season together that would warrant him being on the list. Jerome Baker, I don't think would warrant being a player on the list. I would expect that's the only player in this collection that the Dolphins lost. And that includes like Robert Hunt and potentially Connor Williams in the offensive line. Rob, I think, is perfectly capable of being a top 100 player. But Zach Martin at 68 and Chris Lindstrom at 87 were the only 2 guards that made the list last year. So I think that works against him in a big way. And you could expand that to interior offensive linemen. Jason Kelce was the only center that made the list. So you had 3 interior offensive linemen in the whole league that made the top 100 last year. So the only departure player you have from the top 100 or player that wasn't on the top 100 last year that is going to be on it this year that you lost is going to be Christian Wilkins. I do think Jalen Ramsey will be back on this list again. 36 last year. That was a drop of 27 spots from the previous year. Was it Jalen Ramsey's best season? No. But he also missed half of it. And he wasn't allowed to spotlight being a player who moved around in the way that he did the previous couple years. I think he moves up from 36. I don't think he'll be too much higher. I think he'll be probably around top 25, between 25 and 40. But I think he's up from 36 a little bit. I think Bradley Chubb has a really good argument to be on this list. Whether or not he is a different story, and there's a numbers game element I think you have to be cognizant of, because we're already talking about 5 on offense and Ramsey would be 6. Bradley Chubb last year had 11 sacks. He led the league in forced fumbles last year. He had 22 quarterback hits. He had double-digit tackles for loss. He played in 16 games. Much more of the version of himself like what he was when he first came into the league, when he finished 3rd for Defensive Rookie of the Year and then made his Pro Bowl in his 3rd season. It's a good case. Now, I think the edge rusher collection, you'd probably have to get through 10 to 12 guys before his name comes up. So do you think 13 to 15 edge guys make the list of the top 100 guys? Let's see. Last year, outside linebackers was Micah Parsons, Khalil Mack, Hassan Reddick, Brian Burns, Joey Bosa, and then defensive ends was Max Crosby, Myles Garrett, Cameron Jordan, Grady Jarrett, defensive tackle, Trey Hendrickson, Zadarius Smith, Aiden Hutchinson, DeMarcus Lawrence. So, if Bradley Chubb certainly had a better year this year than DeMarcus Lawrence has had in each of the last 2 seasons. So I think you're going to be on the fringe. If you're honorable mention, wouldn't surprise me. But I could also see him like Zadarius Smith in Minnesota in 2022, had 10 sacks, 5 passes defense, but 1 forced fumble. Bradley Chubb had better stats across the board. I think he can make a push. I think Zach Sealer's worthy. I don't think Zach Sealer's profile is he's a pretty under the radar kind of guy. I don't think he would be on. If you had to have me set the over under, I would set it at 6.5. I'd take the over too. I think you get a chance between Bradley Chubb. I think you have a decent chance that he makes it. But safe betting line would be probably 5.5 for guys that make the top 100 for the Dolphins in the next edition of this top 100 list, which starts next week. I believe next Wednesday is when it starts on the NFL Network. So you have that to look forward to. We have training camp and news to look forward to. I will be with you every step of the way here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it. I appreciate you guys checking out the show. Go Dolphins. I'll be back again soon. Find us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. I'm Kyle Krabs, and I'm out of here.